Hello and welcome to the IndieSider podcast, where I play indie games and then interview the developers. I'm your host, Ken Gagney, and this week I'm playing The Flame in the Flood, the debut game from Molasses Flood, a Boston-based indie studio composed of alumni of Irrational Games, developers of Bioshock Infinite. Let's go ahead and start here a new campaign. Yes, I am sure. So I'm going to go with the Traveler mode, which is sort of the easy mode, because I am terrible at this survival game. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever actually played a modern survival game. I haven't played Don't Starve or FTL, and so I'm really bad at this game, and I'm going to say that's due to lack of experience and nothing else, because otherwise I'm sure I'd be awesome, right? So, this game was originally pitched on Kickstarter, where I backed it, full disclosure, as sort of like Oregon Trail on a raft. And I love Oregon Trail. I'm a huge fan of the original Apple II computer and all the games made for it. And Oregon Trail is one of the games that was popularized on that platform. So of course I wanted to play a modern remake of that. Not a remake, but certainly a game inspired by it. So this is a post-societal world that we live in. Think of Station 11 or The Girls with All the Gifts. Except that we don't know exactly what happened. It was some sort of a natural calamity, we suspect. Maybe the polar ice caps melted, because everything seems flooded. And now my character, Scout, and her dog, Aesop, are charged with surviving. They're not trying to save the world, they're not trying to figure out what happened, they just need to survive. And there are various tips here about how to do so. You can manage your backpack, for example. These tutorials are optional, but you can pick up stuff that you come across. Here are some saplings and a feather. Great, you never know what you might need to use those for. And here in the water are some cattails. Gonna grab those, and if I get enough of them I can make a braided cord or some tinder. Not necessarily with the cattail, but there's all this different information about what you can make with stuff. Wolves! I need traps to kill a wolf. Press space to frighten the wolf. So if I push space, I can also frighten away that crow. And crows attract wolves when they fly away, so be careful about that. Let's find out what's inside here. I could take all these things. Jar, water filter, moldy lump. Take it all. Water filter. Let's open up this place. Nothing left. Somebody beat me to it. That's too bad. But, let's see. Water info. Let's see. I can get water from rain, wells, puddles, and the river itself. But be careful about drinking polluted water. Okay, so a few more things up here. Cattails. Cattails. And let me show you what's going on with all this stuff that I'm buying. If I push I for inventory, here are my objectives. Find the radio. No other objective yet. Here's my health status. I am healthy. If I am not healthy, it'll tell me what's wrong with me and how to fix it. Here are all the things that I can make right now. So I have 4 cattails. If I use 1, I can make a braided cord. Tinder also requires a cattail. And this is all 69 things that can be made in this game. So there's a huge crafting portion of this game. I can break it down to 5 different categories if I don't want to see all 69 at once. Here are the clothing, here's the food, and here is the medicinal supplies. Here are the repair utilities and various utensils, and other miscellaneous stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and make a braided cord. And you'll notice that in my backpack, that actually takes up a separate slot. So now I have the cattails right here. I had 4, now I have 3 of those and a braided cord. I can also put things in my tool belt. No, I can't. I can put things in Aesop's bag. Aesop is the dog. But I can also put things in the dock, or on the raft, which you'll see momentarily. Was there another screen I was missing? Yeah, here we go. This shows what I'm wearing at this time. I'm wearing everything I got. Now, the crafting I just did with the braided cord, that can be done anywhere that you have sufficient supplies to do it. But there are other things that you need to craft with a fire. And here's a fire. I'm going to go ahead and use the fire by sitting. If I sit next to a fire, it can dry out my damp clothes, which is an ailment. And see, for example, here I have those 2 moldy lumps. I can now make penicillin. And that will cure things that I can get sick with later. But this requires the fire. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Make my penicillin, which I can only do at the fire. And let's see, I can also sleep at the fire if I want to. Although it's better to find some sort of a shelter and do that so that if it's raining, or if there are monsters, not monsters, there are wolves and boars. I'm also going to get some charcoal from the fire. Hopefully I don't burn my hands while I'm doing that. And let's sit by the fire one more time and see if there's anything else I can craft before I head out, because who knows when I'm next going to find a fire. Let's see, I'm going to make some tinder. And I think that's enough for now. I'm also going to put the penicillin in Aesop's bag, because I'm probably not going to need that anytime soon, and it's more important to leave my own inventory free for things I'm going to be finding and picking up. So let us put the feather in Aesop's bag, because that's used for arrows, to make sure that they fly true. And I don't even have any arrows or a bow or anything with which to make those things, so the feather is certainly going to be limited. I can move around using the WASD keys. I don't have a joystick hooked up right now. I can also just click where I want Scout to go, and usually she goes there. There you go. Alright. Okay, so we always start off in this area of the game, but the rest of the game is procedurally generated. Ooh, a feather. I missed it somehow. So there are some templates that you'll start to recognize, but otherwise the rest of the game is randomly generated. There are some themes. There are like 10 areas to the game. Basic tools. Make a hammer and a knife, I think. River info. River info. Is there anything I need to know about the river? I do not know much about gods, but I think that the river is a strong brown god, sullen, untamed, and intractable. Okay. So, we are ready to hit the seas. By the sea, I mean the river, just like Huckleberry Finn. Off we go. Goodbye, Pinewood. And now I go paddling along and trying to avoid any obstacles. I am not really powering myself, I'm just letting the current take me, and I'm steering left and right a little bit. I can push spacebar to give myself a push, and that's some sort of propulsion, but I don't do that too often because it tires Scout out. You can see at the bottom of the screen her energy levels at the top, the little sort of blue-green semicircle. And then there's also, at the just below that, the orange one is the raft's health. Every time it crashes into something, she loses some of her raft, and if it gets all the way down, she will drown. There's also her food, her water, her sleep, no, her temperature, and her sleep. There we go. Now, all these houses on stilts, I can't dock at these, and I'm about to enter the rapid, so I'm going to be very careful not to crash into anything. This is dangerous. Very pretty, but very dangerous. Seems like a good place to do a crossover with Firewatch. Oh no, I'm going to hit that. There's something I could have stolen off that little island, too. Ooh, fishing line. Oh, I think I did pick it up before I crashed. Okay, that's cool. So there are places I can dock, but they are very specifically labeled here in the Mud Crab Flat, the first of 10 regions. In fact, there'll be little icons on the screen indicating where the dock is and how far away, what direction, and the distance. So I just have to avoid all these obstacles until I get there. Can't really go upstream much, so I'm just going with the flow, which is pretty much all you can do in life. There's a metaphor for you. That one's free. Oh, I hit that, and you can see that my little raft health meter went down. Boo. There are other obstacles in the water, as if the flood is recent, like this tree and branch, which I'm totally about to hit. And I just hit it again. Great, and my raft is already about half dead. I know I'm bad at this game, but this is pretty bad even for me. There's a first dock, 220 meters to the right. I'm gonna guess that's easterly, perhaps? Hey, I successfully navigated that tree. Okay, so you can see that little blue, glowy dock right there. And it's not just the verb dock, it's also the noun dock. So let's go ahead and dock the dock. There. And I just dock my boat. Often has flint, always has a lit fire. And this is also where, if I want, I can put things in the raft. So here I can put my feather in the raft. There. And if I lose my raft, I've not only lost my feather, I've also died. So there's that. Okay, so now let's find out what's here. Aesop is going around, he's probably going to bark at stuff that I can pick up, like this dandelion that I can use to make tea, which will cure me of ailments. I can also eat them for a small buff to my health meter, I guess? I'm not really sure I'm using the word buff correctly, to be honest. Aesop, what you got, boy? So these very first areas tend to be pretty safe. There's not a lot of things that are going to kill you. But my inventory is already full, which means I need to move some stuff. Let's move that. And I'm not going to break anything anytime soon, so let's move my splint. Fishing line, very, very useful, but I need some more stuff to go with it. Should have put the feather in the raft, because that way I can combine the feathers, so that they take up only one slot. And there's a bus. If I wanted, I could sleep in the bus. It'll cost 8 food, 10 water, but gain me 50 sleep. Well, I'm not that tired yet. You can see my health meter at the bottom there. So let's not sleep in the bus. However, if it was raining, I actually would go in there. Aloe, very good for curing ant bites. Now, a lot of places to search here. I might not be able to grab everything because my inventory is limited. I might have to go to the raft and drop some stuff off, which is one of my least favorite things about this, which is the inventory management. I can never seem to get everything I need or want. Okay, so I can't take the salt, so let's move some stuff. Again, aloe. Aloe! Now let's get that salt. And we can see night is falling, and this looks like a safe space, so I probably won't even need to sleep in the dark. I think I'll be safe in the sun, or whatever. Let's see, I looted that. This is something I can loot right here. Throw that tarp off and see what's in there. More old lumber. Excellent. Now, another thing I'm not crazy about is you can see all of these recipes here, and it tells you what each one needs to make it, but you really can't click on the ingredient and see what that ingredient is used for. Maybe I'm missing it somewhere in the game, but I'd really like to know what are all the things that old lumber can be used for. I don't know. But apparently I can make a campfire. I have everything I need to make campfire, which is great. Because not every island has its own campfire. Here's another little stash. Man, this place is just rolling in it. I'm going to want to get that moldy lump. As I mentioned earlier, we can make penicillin with that. And actually, I don't have that penicillin anymore because I had to start my game over because I died. So let's make a quick run to the raft. Oh, and I'm going to want to get that yucca because you can eat yucca. I think you can also make yucca tea, perhaps? Possibly? Anyway, once I leave this island, we'll move on to the interview portion of IndieSider. Let's see, let's move those feathers as we discussed. And penicillin, I guess I do have it. One of the water filters. Let's move the mulberries and the dandelion, because I'm not planning on making tea anytime soon. And I think that's good for now. Oh, and see, the game continues even while you're doing inventory management, which is at times really challenging. If you're trying to set up a trap for a wolf, and the wolf is right there, it's not going to wait for you to set the trap. It's just going to go right in your face and kill you dead. So yeah, that'll happen. That has happened. Not a good time. There. Let's quickly sit by the fire and cook my yucca. Yucca. Okay, let's make that. Ooh, we can make a stone knife. That's very important for making a whole lot of things, especially for skinning animals. So now I can make I have the recipe for making other things now, like a steel knife. I already have a stone knife. I don't need to make more. So that's good for now. Actually, let's make a braided cord, because I don't have any of those. And I already have a tinder. See, now I can make a raft frame? Ooh. I've never actually made one of those before. I think I need to find a marina to apply it, to actually equip it. But hey. I have no feathers, no flint, and no steel knife. I need all those things, in addition to the sapling I do have, to make an arrow. And that's not even counting the bow that I don't have. Alright, so let's grab some charcoal from here. And be on our way. So this week on the IndieSider podcast, I'm chatting with Gwen Frey, one of the animators and the animator and biz dev for this game. And if you would like to listen to the podcast without the video of the game, then you can find that at IndieSider.net, which is where the audio version of this podcast is found. You can find all the episodes there, as well as links to myself on Twitter, which is at Gamebits, where you can suggest games for future episodes, and also find the podcast on iTunes, where you can leave a recommendation. Thanks so much for watching, and let's get on with the show. Today I'm speaking with Gwen Frey, the animator and biz dev for the debut game from Molasses Flood, The Flame in the Flood. Hello, Gwen.
Hi.
How are you tonight?
I am good.
Fantastic. It is the eve of you flying out to GDC. You must be running around trying to get everything done at the last minute.
Oh my god, you have no idea. I've procrastinated way too much, and it's not even like the normal stuff where you have to pack and you wait till the last minute to pack. It's like, I probably should have finished up my slides for my talk. Like, I've taken procrastination to the next level this time around. Because I'm actually speaking at GDC, and I'm literally editing slides tonight.
Well, you've been to GDC like a half a dozen times at least, but this is your first time speaking at the event, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
And what is the subject of your talk?
Well, I'm giving two. The first one is going to be a micro talk. That's one I've like waited too long on, and that's just fun. It's like a comedic little bit about how being an animator kind of makes you a little bit strange. And the other one, I'm doing a talk at the main conference on Wednesday at 11, and that talk is about animating quadrupeds. So it's a really nerdy and technical. It's a deep dive into how to animate quadrupeds for video games.
Using any particular software like Maya or Unity?
I try not to. I try to give techniques so that people can take that and use it in whatever authoring application they're using. I don't want to do something that's only Unreal, as much as I love Unreal, or only Maya, because then it's less useful to people who are coming from other studios or who are using different software. So I try to keep it pretty general.
Excellent. There will be a link to that in the show notes, and I know that the GDC Vault is really good about getting videos of the talks up afterwards, so I'll update this podcast with those links as soon as they're available so everybody in the world can see your talk.
Awesome. Well, hopefully it pans out well. Otherwise, I'll be begging you to not do that. It's be footage of me just like curled up in a ball weeping.
Well, take this podcast to be practice then.
All right, cool.
Yay. So, as I mentioned, you are animator and biz dev. For those who don't know, what does that latter title entail?
So, when you work on a small studio, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And I'm the animator, and I do like the effects for our game, and I do a lot of narrative scripting and stuff, but I also do biz dev. I don't necessarily talk to the press as much. That's more Forrest. This is actually really unusual for me. They don't usually let me out of my cave. Most of what I do is just analyze whether or not certain business decisions make sense, or things like I run our QuickBooks, I pay our taxes, a lot of the boring stuff you don't think about that goes with running a studio, making sure you have sales tax to sell the game at PAX. Things like that are the kinds of things I take care of. I like the term CFO because it sounds more, important than administrative assistant. And we all mostly handle our own email. It's just Forrest and I kind of split up the business side of things into, he's an incredible speaker, and he's the designer, so he's the one the press usually wants to talk to. So he does a lot of talking to the press, and he does a lot of going out and making deals and getting deals. I do more of the boring that no one wants to do. That's just the story of my life. I actually enjoy it. I enjoy figuring out if we're going to be in budget this year. I like having the company bank account. That's pretty cool. And I like looking into the business side of games. I like looking into how different marketing techniques have worked out for different people. I spend hours on Steam Spy. Just scrolling through a Steam list, looking at how games did on Steam Spy and trying to figure out what went right or what went wrong. And I enjoy it. I think it's a really interesting and fascinating industry to be in and to think about the business side of things.
So you must have been integral to developing this game's Kickstarter.
Oh man, that was a complete team effort. I can't take credit for any more than a sixth of almost anything on this game. The Kickstarter is a full-time job for more than one person, to be honest. Kickstarter is this massive... I mean, launching our Kickstarter was almost as dizzying as launching the actual product.
Wow.
The sheer amount of, because your Kickstarter is the first time the press hears about you, so you get flooded with emails. You get tons of emails from the press. They're mostly questions about the game or about this or that. You get you just have a dizzying amount of response on social media that you have to cover. I remember we split it up so that Forrest took Twitter, and I took Facebook and Reddit, and Chad, I believe, took. We always give Chad Twitch. He's always trolling Twitch, and we basically split things up. I guess back then we didn't have Twitch. Like, it was such an intense month. I think I gained 2 years. Like, I think I aged 2 years in that month, in the month that we were in Kickstarter. You were constantly trying to crank out content and keep people excited and interested and stay at the top of various social media feeds. You're trying to, in our case, we were debating different stretch goals. The launch up to Kickstarter, there was a ton of work to do to determine how much does it cost to ship a T-shirt to Australia, or versus America, and how many people do we think will pledge from Australia versus America, and where do we want to price each of these tiers, and what do we want to price the game at? You haven't even made the game yet, and you've got to figure out what the final price is for it, which is fine. It's just lots and lots of little things like this. Going through Kickstarter is an experience you can't really explain. If you meet somebody else who's gone through Kickstarter and been there and lived through that hell, you have a shared experience and a shared understanding. But to explain it, like how insanely stressful it is to somebody who's never gone through it, is actually really hard. Because none of these things sound hard individually. It's just this need to be constantly connected and awake every moment of every day for a month that it's difficult to describe how stressful that is.
And were you still developing the game while you were running the Kickstarter? Because you went into that crowdfunding campaign with an impressive amount of assets. You had a pretty strong prototype even at that point. So did you set that aside to focus on crowdfunding for a month, or were you doing both in tandem?
We tried to do both in tandem. We intended to do both in tandem. But I honestly have to say we spent most of that month refreshing our Kickstarter page, talking on social media, trying to get anybody to pay attention to us and everybody to pay attention to us. We spent that month doing things, trying to write articles and get the press to print them. Because the press is probably a lot more likely to print something. If you make it as easy as possible, like if you write the article for them, the press is more likely to print it. So just coming up with content and just feeding the content beast was most of that month. I don't think we actually did much for the game that month.
Well, it paid off because you had some fantastic footage, including a huge feature story in Game Informer, but by I think the time that article ran in print, I had already seen the game on Kickstarter, and what caught my eye was that it was being billed as sort of an Oregon Trail on a raft. And even Kotaku recently ran an article about the Flame in the Flood after it had entered early access with the headline, "The Flame in the Flood is like Oregon Trail except mean." So how much of this game would you say was inspired by Oregon Trail, or what other games were you inspired by?
Oh man, we had a lot of inspiration for this game, and I would say Oregon Trail was definitely one of them. I think when we first came up with the concept, we described it as Oregon Trail meets Tubin. And that we said that jokingly, but I think that actually kind of stuck for quite a while. So yeah, Oregon Trail is definitely a huge inspiration. I'd say Don't Starve would definitely be another inspiration. FTL. If you've ever played FTL, I love that game. It's a little bit of a problem. We took elements of each of these games that we liked. Like Don't Starve, you'll notice, I mean, it's a roguelike. It's a really popular and amazing roguelike. But we wanted to take that and combine it with okay, so I'd say in Don't Starve, your goal is to collect resources and build up a base camp, almost. Like the end game of Don't Starve is mostly you accumulate a camp and you kind of get into this self-sustaining mode. Whereas we wanted something that always forced you to be moving. We wanted you to have this experience, this kind of Southern Gothic experience where you're always moving and you can never stay still. We were very inspired by Huckleberry Finn and stories where you could never quite settle. You're going on a journey. We really wanted you to feel like you were going on a journey. So we took a lot of inspiration from all of those games. We took inspiration from things that weren't games at all. I mean, our art director grew up in the Deep South, so our art director definitely wanted that Southern Gothic feel and had a lot of personal stories to add to the game. We all watched several films, like I think...
Beasts of the Southern Wild?
Yes! Beasts of the Southern Wild was one of the ones that was required. How'd you know that?
I've done my research.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was the only one where they came down hard. Like everyone in the studio will watch this movie, and I kind of I like my popcorn flicks, so I wasn't quite sure about that. But you know what? That's a good movie. I'm glad I watched it. That's a good film. Excuse me. I'll get in trouble. It's an excellent film. I'm glad I watched it.
So you've been inspired by a lot of games, and you've worked on some amazing games yourself, like Marvel Heroes and Bioshock Infinite. But those games are very different from The Flame and the Flood. How would you say those experiences prepared you for this latest adventure?
Well, you know, it's weird. Everything builds on everything else. And as you gain experience in life, you will find ways to apply what you've done in the past to what you're currently working on. And I mean, there's just the obvious. Working on a lot of games, you'll get to know your engines better. For instance, both Marvel Heroes and Bioshock Infinite used Unreal. So moving from an Unreal game to working on another Unreal game, there was not much of a technology hurdle there. We managed to overcome any kind of technical barriers pretty quickly. What else? Let me think. I'd say Bioshock Infinite definitely was the one that most prepared me to work on The Flame and the Flood, partly because that's where I met the team that I'm working with. Most of the team is from Bioshock Infinite, and we all work together there. And there is something, it is important to be able to work with your team. Making a game is a very collaborative process. And because we worked together before, and we all knew each other, and we all knew how to work together, I think that really bootstrapped us a lot. Also, I do have to say, Bioshock Infinite had an Americana art style, and I don't think it's nowhere near as awesome, if I can say this, as The Flame and the Flood. Scott Sinclair, our art director, was art director on Bioshock Infinite and on The Flame and the Flood, so they're both his art, but I feel like he really stepped it up with The Flame and the Flood. I think our art style is gorgeous and interesting and twisted. And I'd say Bioshock Infinite did kind of help get me that mindset to go for something that's brighter and that feels more Americana.
Awesome. So here's another side of that same coin. What aspects of this game were you not prepared for? What part of your work history did not prepare you for The Flame of the Flood? What sent you most out of your comfort zone?
Oh man, there was a lot of things that I had never done before because I moved to a smaller studio. I went from working at a studio with hundreds of people to working at a studio with 6 people total. So things like talking to the press. I've never been on a podcast until about 3 weeks ago. I wasn't prepared to go talk to the press. That's always the most jarring and nerve-wracking thing, I think. Between that, most of the challenges that I was faced with, I was really excited to face. So it's difficult to call them negatives. It was kind of cool to learn how to do effects. I had never had to do that for a game before. It was pretty cool to learn how to learn QuickBooks and learn how to run a business. That was actually pretty awesome. I don't think I was prepared to run the production of a studio, which I didn't. I don't think anybody did. I'm actually amazed we got the game done without a producer or anybody kind of cracking the whip. But so I think maybe in the ideal world where the studio grows, I think a producer was probably in our future.
Oh, well, it sounds like you filled that niche neatly.
I don't think I did, actually. I'm pretty sure Forrest was more of a producer than me.
I'm sure maybe you were a sixth of the producer then.
That's fair. We did all produce ourselves in a big way. We all kept ourselves under the gun to keep everything on time.
So the first time I saw you speak was at the Boston Fig Talks, where you gave a great talk, and one of the things you talked about was the same thing you'll be talking about at GDC, which is animating quadrupeds. And you were animating wolves, boars, and then other creatures that aren't quadrupeds, like snakes. I saw your video about how you had the rest animation, how they'd curl clockwise or counterclockwise. And in one of your time-lapse videos for animating a quadruped, I saw you watching YouTube videos of the real life analogs of the animals you were animating. So how does one learn how to model these creatures? Like, if unless you go to the zoo, and maybe you did, how do you know what a boar moves like?
Man, you really did your research. This is awesome. You've looked through all of my YouTube videos.
I didn't want to waste your time.
No way. All right, awesome. So for all these creatures, I mostly used real life reference. Not in that I would go find a wild boar because that's kind of impossible, but I do go on obviously YouTube. You caught me there, but Animal Planet. I look for reference in documentaries, and for snakes, I found some gnarly snake documentaries, and I watched a bunch of those.
Wow, very cool. Although I guess if you really want to be true to the game, you would go find a wild boar and live the life that Scout did.
Oh yes, of course. Travel with nothing but your backpack and a dog down a river in the southern Americana. We'd have to end society first, though, in order for everything to come together.
Well, hey, if you survived last winter in Boston, I think you can survive anything.
Oh man, that winter was rough.
So, speaking of ending society, did you see the movie Tomorrowland with George Clooney?
I have not.
It's a mediocre film, but it harkens back to what we used to think the future would be like, with the Jetsons and these ray guns and jetpacks, and it was very optimistic, Star Trek style. And nowadays, it seems like whenever we look to the future, we have zombie apocalypses or post-apocalyptic worlds like Station 11 or The Girl with All the Gifts. And The Flame of the Flood kind of fits that genre, where something has happened to this world and it's all gone to hell and Scout is just trying to survive. But there has to be some degree of optimism in there, because otherwise there's no reason for Scout to keep going. She has to be optimistic that she can make it another day, and the player has to be optimistic too, and the gameplay offers them reasons to be optimistic by offering them various caches and supplies, but the art has to support the gameplay and vice versa. So what does hope look like?
Wow, there was a lot packed into that question.
I know that you're more the animator than the art direction, but I'm hoping you might have some insight into this.
Okay, what does hope look like? Interesting. I will say, all right, step one, I'm not sure I'd entirely agree that we look to the future and we, as a society, overwhelmingly see something that's totally bleak. I think, like, The Martian is a good example of looking to the future and seeing something that's kind of, cool and what humanity is possible. But that's kind of a tangent.
No, it's completely fair. I mean, you shouldn't take my question for granted, and that is a great example. That was a great book and a great movie.
Yeah, I think there's just so much media now that depending on what you're looking for, you can go find it. You can find media where the future is happy. You can find media where things are bleak. And I will say our game is bleak. The world is dangerous. We were trying to simulate how in real life, if there was no society and you were trying to struggle and survive, the most basic things like dysentery could be your undoing. And we wanted that to be part of the game. As for how the art mirrors that, that's an interesting question. The art is dangerous, and you will notice at night everything gets darker, and there's, you can see eyes following you, and the world is mysterious and dark, and we were going for that. But the world is also beautiful, and the world is very much unknown. Keep in mind, our entire game is random, so we wanted to have that mystery in the art as well as in the world. So I think having the art style be kind of mysterious and a little bit weird was really a benefit, and I'm a huge fan of what Sync did there. I think, in a way, sometimes the art is a little too beautiful in a way that's good. I find sometimes I'll want to stop and run around on an island and look at all the things, and I'll forget that I'm dying. And I think that's dangerous too, in a way. I think the art is like this. Having beautiful art like this in a game where you have to constantly move is kind of toying with the player. It's kind of making things a little bit difficult. Now you have to choose. Do you want to stop and smell the roses? Because the roses might have snakes,
Wow, that's everything is out to kill you, basically.
Oh, just most things.
I assume you're gathering some statistics via Steam. Can you tell me what the most common causes of death have been?
Ooh, okay. I don't know what I am allowed to say. I will say it's changed rapidly over time. It used to be we've rebalanced things based on what's killing people. I think right now, wolves are a pretty constant threat, especially when to new players. Wolf death seems to be one of the more common deaths, and I'd say drowning tends to be one of the more common deaths. Again, I think those two affect new players more than everybody else, but those two are probably tied for the most common killers.
And if this game were actually to come to pass and we found ourselves in a post-apocalyptic or post-societal world, which one do you think would do you in?
Ooh, jeez. I don't know, man.
Are you well equipped to live in this world?
No. No, I mean, I could probably, let's see, what would get me first? I would try to pet the boar and die. There's the stupid, like some kind of, I would just do something silly. Honestly, I don't think I'm physically capable of using the rafts to navigate the river. However, I would never get on the raft because I would assume that's futile anyway. So I would just stay on an island until it was depleted of resources, and then I would waste from whatever would kill me first, which would probably be not necessarily thirst, I'd probably drink poisonous water or like some water with bacteria in it, and I'd die of one of the various sicknesses you get from drinking still water. I think that's probably how I would go.
Well, at least you're confident about it.
Well, I had a good run, Ken. It's been a pretty good life.
That's right, you got to produce a wonderful game.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you ask for?
Let's step back and talk a little bit more about the game's development, a little bit more concrete and a little bit less bleak. So this game came out in early access, last September, was it?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And it finally launched for real in February. I saw you had a great blog where you detailed some of the game's changes over time, like swapping out the water canteen for the water jars. What would you say were some of the biggest changes that once people got their hands on it, you said, oh, that doesn't work the way we expected?
Interesting. For us, we had two phases, right? Like in September last year, we entered early access, but before that, we entered Kickstarter Alpha. So we had the Kickstarter Alpha is when we opened the floodgates and we really found a ton of bugs and things to fix for the game and ways to that we really needed to balance the game. That was actually really good for us, I think, as a developer, because before we were even in early access, we had a smaller, more exclusive early access where we got to work out a lot of kinks. And we're only 6 people. We tested the game as best we could as 6 people, but there's nothing like having a couple hundred people pounding on your game. That really helped us a lot. So most of the changes that came out of that were bugs, bug fixes, balance fixes. We found we had features that we were going to add that we realized we just didn't need to because they would just make the game worse. We obviously a huge problem. I don't know if I'm gonna call it a problem. So we went back and forth on a lot was thirst in our game and how you collect water. Can you drink water? Can you drink water that's directly from the sky while it's raining? What can you do when you're desperate? Different things like we were gonna add a system where if you were desperately hungry, you could cook and eat your boots. We had things like that.
Fillet of soul.
Yeah, but that wound up not being as important as just getting the core loop of the game up and going.
So, as you mentioned, you are currently on a team of 6 people, coming from a team of, how many worked on Bioshock Infinite? What, like 150?
That sounds about right. Honestly, towards the end, we had so many people in QA, I don't even know what the final number ended up being.
So, there was one article that said that Irrational Games had seemingly unlimited resources, and of course, Molasses Flood has very finite resources. What one resource did you wish you could have brought with you from Irrational that you didn't?
So do you mean a resource as in something physical, like a computer, or...?
It could be a role on the team, like if you could have hired a 7th person, or it could be a particular program or a skill set, something other than, a lot more money.
Yeah, more people would have definitely helped. Definitely. I mean, it's fun and it's exciting to take on more and more jobs, but I think Forrest specifically was really stressed out and stretched really thin, doing both the talking to the press and managing kind of like PR stuff and managing designing the game. So I guess I would lean towards either maybe a designer to pick up some of that stuff off for us, but most likely something in the opposite end. Like, I think if we could have one thing, it would probably be a producer, somebody who could help look at our timeline and manage the team, and make sure we're all on track, because there's a confidence that comes to your team when you have a producer. And also somebody that could just handle a lot of the nitty-gritty emails and forum support and talking to people on our forums. You'll notice as soon as we came out in early access, someone from the team checked the Steam forums every day, at least 2 to 3 times a day. And it was like that for everything. We have like a contact mailing list, so we get tons of emails, we get tons of messages on Twitter, a few messages to our Facebook directly. And having somebody who could just manage that would have really eased up the burden of game publishing, and would have really made it easier for us to focus on development. And I think that would have been the one thing I'd ask for.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe.
I have one question about your Kickstarter stretch goals, which is that one of the questions in the FAQ on the Kickstarter was, how about a PS4 or Xbox One port? And you said, not right now. We do have a PS4 as a stretch goal, and that stretch goal was not met. The game did nonetheless come out on Xbox One. And is that through collaboration with Microsoft that made that happen?
Yes, that was one of the things that was super cool. After we finished our Kickstarter, Microsoft reached out to us and they said, "Hey, we noticed you didn't hit your stretch goal, and that's a shame because we'd like this game to be in the Xbox One. Do you think maybe you'll do it anyway? We'll get you a dev kit or whatever." And we basically said we can't afford it because we couldn't, and we wanted to make sure we had the best PC experience, the experience we promised we would deliver. And then Microsoft tried to like sweeten the deal. They offered us a lot of help. Basically, they gave us a dev kit and they helped us port the game to Xbox. And without their help, I don't know if we could have done it. So they actually helped us do the port, which is why we managed to pull it off. And we don't have that kind of any promise of resources or programming support or money or anything from the PS4. So in order to port to PS4, it would have to make sense financially. And I know this is a really boring topic, but it's real life, right? We can't... Porting our game, what we have now, to the PS4 costs a certain amount of money. We can kind of project exactly how much money we would get from doing that. And until those numbers line up so that one number is higher than the other, we probably just can't do it, because it would be losing money from a studio that's very small and can't afford to spend money just to port something to another platform, you know?
Right, and if you're going to release on one platform, probably the most economical one as far as return on your investment is Steam.
Yeah. I'm trying to wonder if I'm allowed to say some of the things I'm saying right here, but this is why we usually have Forrest do the talking to the press. But for certain games, Steam is an excellent platform. For PC, Steam is definitely king, and our roguelikes tend to do best on PC. So for us, Steam was definitely the most important. Steam and obviously other PC platforms like GOG was very important to us.
And since the Molasses Flood team has been so attentive to player feedback, what has the reception to the game been since its release?
It's been mixed. Some people really, really like it, and some people really, really hate it. I mean, our Metacritic is 70. It's in the high 70s now, and I've found that it's very polarizing as a game, which is interesting. Some people get into it because they really like the atmosphere and the music and the mood, and some people get into it because they love roguelikes. But these things don't necessarily click with everybody. So some people, we get a lot of people that return the game because they just didn't feel that it was hardcore enough, or it just wasn't the experience that they personally were looking for. But I think that's good in a way. I kind of like that we made something that's a little bit unique and that can appeal to people very strongly and cause a strong like or dislike. I'd rather have half the people love it and half the people hate it than have a situation where everyone just goes, "Oh, I don't know, it was good." You know? I kind of like that it's polarizing.
No, that makes perfect sense. That means that you did something right.
Maybe. We'll find out.
So remind our listeners where we can find the game and the company online.
Yes. So if you're looking to buy The Flame in the Flood, you can get it online from GOG, Good Old Games, or from Steam. You can also get it from the Humble Store. You can purchase the game on Xbox One. And if you want to know more about what the Molasses Flood is up to, we do have a blog, though we're going to be quiet for a little while, at themolassesflood.com.
Excellent. And what about Twitter?
Oh, yes, our Twitter feed is at Molasses Flood. My personal Twitter feed is Dire Goldfish.
Dire Goldfish. That sounds like some homebrew creature for an AD&D game.
It was, I can't even explain how I came up with this. Honestly, I started going by Goldfish because my memory is terrible, and Gwen Frey and Goldfish are both GF. And then at some point it became Dire Goldfish because I was in a bad mood that day, and that's just what stuck.
I would not want to catch you on a bad day.
Yeah, it was brutal. I don't remember it, though. I mean, Goldfish.
Right. Ooh, look, a castle.
Shiny.
Well, you are flying out to GDC. Best of luck at that event. I hope that it and the Flame of the Flood both do fabulously, and if this podcast is any indication, I know at least you will be great.
Aw, thanks, man. That means a lot.